August 3rd, 2024. Well, as the hearings proceed and then the press conference today by the acting head of the Secret Service, it's looking more and more like Secret Service incompetence is at a pretty serious level, or could even be worse. But basically, we're looking at the situation that, for instance, it's been revealed that obviously there were massive communication failures in the July 13th attack on former President Trump, and this and that obviously led to some well, what happened. I mean, for one thing, it appears that about 30 seconds before the shooting started, a police officer had radioed in that there was a man with a rifle on the roof of the building. And so the question is, why didn't that message get any kind of reaction? Well, part of the problem was a pair of the communication to the counter snipers on their position on the top of the buildings there, that overlook the stadium and the podium, that those people were being communicated by, get this, by text, not by radio like in their ear uh, headset where they would be immediately informed. They would have to go pick up a phone and check their text. Now, meanwhile, of course, they're manning a rifle with a scope, and they're trying to overlook the situation, but they have to also read text. What a goofed up situation. I mean, and so that kind of illustrates, I think, the things we're learning about this, and there's a lot more that's come out. I think the basic scenario I outlined at the end of my last video is pretty much right. And of course, there's still some ambiguity that's coming in. We'll look at that. But so the lack of communication between the police officers, both state police and local police that were involved in the security and the Secret Service, appears to be one of the key elements. But otherwise, we also have other problems. For instance, one of the victims was actually taking a video and saw Mr. Crooks moving around on the roof of the building next door there, about 150 yards away. And what this is kind of amazing. I mean, he was quite visible there to him. It was visible to people on the ground level. So how is it possible that the snipers in Overlook, particularly the team that's furthest away, missed all this? Perhaps because they were looking in a different direction. But that may be the answer to that question. And so we're having a bit of a problem here. Although you would still think the people yelling things like he's got a gun and stuff would have got somebody's attention. And actually, some of these observations were apparently more than 30 seconds, more like 2 minutes or more earlier. So, at any rate, so that's what we're kind of learning here. We need to learn a little bit more about who this agent in charge was and what kind of decisions they made, what they knew, and when they knew it. And until we get those kind of details, it's going to be hard to get a handle on this situation. But if you like these videos, please give me a like. It helps the algorithm. We're always looking for more subscriptions. Thanks to those who have. And of course, you can click the bell for notifications. And also you can check me out on Rumble if you're a member of that instead of YouTube. Yeah, so that's kind of what we're kind of coming up with in all this. There have been new videos out, including one that seems to detail the shooting sequence a lot more. And one paradox I'm getting between what the Secret Service is saying and what was, let's say, what I'm hearing and some of the soundtracks of these videos is that the Secret Service is indicating that essentially one shot was fired by a Secret Service counter sniper, which killed the assailant. Okay, that's good, but when I listen to the soundtrack, the video, and listen to what I'm hearing, I'm hearing two, what sounds to me to be shots fired by presumably a suppressed rifle, as opposed to the more, the sounds of the AR-15, which are much more distinct in a way. But the point is, you have 8 shell casings that have been found on the roof, and there's a video showing where they're counting those. Although we don't actually get to see the casings up close. And we have, and I think there's 2 shots, presumably by counter snipers, and yet they're only admitting to one that killed the guy. And so that is a bit of a paradox to me, and I think that needs to be cleared up. Another thing that I would say is interesting to note is everybody agrees that there's a sequence of 3 rounds that are fired comparatively slowly, and then 5 rounds, then there's a gap in time, then 5 rounds are fired rapid fire. And what has not been determined yet, as I understand it, is what was he shooting at with those last 5 rounds? I think the first 3 we know. He was targeting former President Trump, obviously, and did graze him in the ear, and he actually correctly wounded the person who was taking the video that caught him maneuvering rather rapidly across the building there. And one of them also, I believe, had another bystander, somebody very close to this individual, and I think one of them, I believe, is the one that hit the hydraulic hose. And then you have then a gap in time. Then you have a group of 5 shots, and then right after it sounds distinctly. We hear what sounds like a suppressed rifle shot, which is a distinct, sound. If anybody that's heard this, is pretty distinctive. And then we have a gap of a few seconds. I think up to ultimately the 15 seconds roughly, according to the Secret Service. So I'll use that as a number. And then you hear one last suppressed rifle shot, which presumably is the one, almost certainly is the one that killed the assailant. So it's left is what was that first suppressed shot? I'm playing with the theory, of course, and then the other question that we're still looking at, of course, is the layout of the scene there with the assailant, and the fact that the shell casings from the AR are on both sides of his body, according to what the police on the roof said. So, that leads us to the idea that, to me, that essentially he basically must have noticed after firing his first 3 rounds that I've got a sniper team taking aim at me, and in a panic is what he must have been firing the 5 rounds at them, not very accurately, but perhaps effective enough to throw them off bore. I'm thinking that they may have fired 2 shots, that their first shot was taken maybe quickly because they're being shot at themselves, and either it threw off their aim just because, well, you kind of can get a little flinchy when bullets are flying at you, I guess, all right, or that they just fired a round in his general direction to counter suppress him, let's say. In any event, if that's the case, then the fire chief, retired fire chief there, was then hit in the head by one of those 5 rounds, and the other, we have no idea where they went. But I'm looking at, he was at a higher altitude in the bleachers there, so I tend to think that probably he was hit when he got up to try to get over his family. He probably got hit in the head by one of them, not being aimed at him, but just randomly. But no other person was hit by any of those 4 rounds, even though it was a bleachers full of people. So my conclusion is he was shooting at an upward elevation, probably at the counter sniper. And that's the reason I'm thinking that. And then, of course, and then after that one shot, which presumably missed him, then a few seconds later, the kill shot, and it's over. So that's the way I'm seeing it playing out now, but it doesn't, like the Secret Service is actually stating it this way. So we got to kind of keep our eye on the ball there. Now, there are other conspiracy theories that are out there that fall into various categories. this Lieutenant Colonel Schaefer that appears often on the various videos, including the Judge Napolitano show. And the thing is, I would generally tend to take him as one of the more level-headed individuals. Put out an idea that there were two shooters, the one that fired three well-aimed shots, and then the young guy did the last five. But I tend to, in spite of everything there, I do have respect for his expertise, but I can't see where that second more professional individual was. I don't see how you would coordinate that with the young guy, Crooks. I don't see how you would coordinate the two. And so I tend to reject that idea. In fact, I tend to think that what we're finding is that Crooks probably really was the shooter, which leads us to a variety of thoughts. The fact he still has these encrypted accounts that apparently have not been penetrated yet. And my guess is, depending on which ones he has, they may not be. After all, the Telegram encrypted accounts are used often in Ukraine and Russia, by people expressing a variety of opinions. And both those countries have some pretty nasty secret service, not secret service, what do you call them, secret police type units. The FSB and the SBU, is it in Ukraine? At any rate, they're both people you don't want to have be on the bad side of. So I'm kind of like, if they're easy to penetrate, I have a feeling that we might be able to penetrate them. And I'm wondering if he's also a gamer. And although people have been trying to find any clear political motivations, I think that perhaps he might have been recruited online to do this, and perhaps offered money in the form of maybe cryptocurrency if he would carry out this thing, and maybe even it was given some coaching. This is a possibility. I mean, because we don't know what was in those accounts, who he was talking to, and why. I can't. The FBI's concepts in the Senate hearing seem a little preposterous to think that he was really an anti-immigrant person. I mean, if he was anti-immigrant, why would he be wanting to shoot Trump? That doesn't make any sense. Where if he was a left-winger who believed the Democrat rhetoric about the threat to democracy and all that stuff, then we could see where the person could become motivated, particularly if he was a bit on the unhinged side. Well, at any rate, those are some observations I have, and I think until if we can't get into those accounts, we may never know everything. The other source of information is the parents. I mean, I don't know what kind of interrogation the FBI has had of them and the degree to which they've been cooperative. I mean, it would be hard for me to believe he was that worked up with a left winger or somebody that hated Trump that much that he wouldn't have said something, in the preceding months or before the event. And one would tend to think that they would be a source of information on that. And since he's dead, I would think they would be willing to give that up, I guess. So we'll have to see. It's interesting that we're this many days into it now, nearly 3 weeks, and we still haven't seemed to have gotten to the bottom of what really happened here. And so this will tend to breed conspiracy theories for sure. I think they've already rapidly crossing the point where it's going to be hard to really put this one back in the bottle, so to speak, from a conspiracy point of view. So at any rate, that's just kind of my observations here. I plan to put a link to a video which I base my comments on the shot sequences, and you can follow that if you want to see if you think I'm hearing it right or not. Okay, well that's kind of that on that subject. I've got a few other topics since we're in this video here. One, of course, Kamala Harris has pulled up closer to Trump in some of the polls we got. It seems like there's a lot of polls running around, some of which I think are questionable. I'm a little bit dubious of that Bloomberg poll that came out, but I think that one is a little questionable. Of course, when you don't like a certain outcome, you tend to question it. The Rasmussen poll is interesting, which the one with all five, five key candidates in it. You have of course, Trump and Harris, and now you also, you have RFK Jr. and then the Green candidate and the Cornell. He's that kind of fringe guy. I don't know if he's even on the ballot most places. I guess he could be a write-in, but um, at any rate, I think that what's interesting on that is that when you go from a just a Harris versus Trump comparison, Harris actually comes up a percent in the poll when you put all five in, which I think is really weird. I mean, because they have other candidates, some of them, well, three of which generally have more of a liberal bent to them, you know, and yet it pushes people more in the direction of Harris. That seems to be kind of a polling glitch. But I think one factor that we're going to be having to look at is just how does the RFK vote pan out as time goes forward. I still think that this is new, and like I said, we're kind of in a Kamalagasm right now, and I think once that subsides, I tend to think once people start thinking about what they're really dealing with, and the fact is this is not a really fast on her feet candidate, in my opinion. She can read from a teleprompter, and she can do it better than Biden could, but that's maybe. But beyond that, I think she's not necessarily the best debater in the world. So we'll have to follow that one. On the Ukraine war front, I'll make a few comments about what's going on there. It looks like that the Russian offensive is continuing and seems to be gaining a little bit of momentum. Again, everything in this conflict is slow, but they seem to be, for instance, they seem to have breached the road to Volovar, which is that fortress in the south, kind of the elbow of the occupied territory, you want to call it, just north of that. There's a fortress that Ukraine has held pretty much from the beginning of the conflict, and a key supply road to that has just been breached by the Russians. So if the Ukrainians can't push the Russians back from that, which we'll see what kind of counterattack they do, that's going to limit the supplies that area. And ultimately, it looks like the Russians are planning on doing kind of a double envelopment and surrounding that thing. And meanwhile, they're also trying to breach forward and hit a major supply node. But that may take maybe a month or so. We'll have to see. There's also some discussion about, I saw a thing where China was talking about starting September the 1st to limit the sales of RPG drones. And that's a little unclear to me. Are they talking about just to Russia? Are we talking about to Russia and Ukraine? Are we talking about I don't know what they're, I mean, it looks to me like that this could have some impact on the war if those were less numerous, but it's unclear what that really means. Although the Russians have their own homemade military drones too. So, but the PVR drones, those things are very commonly used to attack armored vehicles and so forth with explosive charges and kind of kamikaze type attacks. So we'll have to see what that pertains also. But anyhow, and of course the F-16s have finally apparently arrived in Ukraine, and at the same time the Russians apparently are debuting a longer range version of Iskander. So both of those may come into play against each other. So I kind of mentioned this is kind of, however, the conflict continues, and it moves its own pace, but it looks like the Russians are making some significant gains at the moment. On the other hand, the Ukrainians are doing a variety of missile attacks and so forth, which may be forcing the Russians to deploy their aircraft further back, and that's another aspect of the conflict. So anyway, I'll be wrapping this up for now. I'll be posting this both on YouTube and Rumble, and of course the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below. And with this campaign ramping up, I'll probably be posting more than I have been. Until next time.